AFIO Now is presented by Northwest Financial Advisors, where our world revolves around you.
Hello, everyone. This is Jim Hughes with AFIO Now. We are a program of recorded interviews with former U.S. intelligence officers. And today I have a delightful guest. Her name is Lillian Wang. She is a professional writer specializing in dramatic features and episodic series with plot twists and thrilling elements, often inspired by true events. Before she became a full-time writer, she practiced technology, cybersecurity, and privacy law in New York City. And before that, she worked for the U.S. intelligence community. She has conversational French and Mandarin Chinese, and she is represented by Rosa Entertainment and Verve Talent Agency, and she is a proud member of the Writers Guild of America East. Lillian, welcome to AFIO Now.
Thank you very much, Jim. I'm so happy to be here.
Lillian, how were you approached initially by CIA, and what motivated you to join?
Yeah, so I was studying for my master's in international affairs at Columbia University in New York. I was actually at a job fair looking for a potential post-graduation job, and I was talking to a table. It was a consulting firm table about career opportunities. I was talking about how I had traveled overseas and would love to travel as a consultant, and I have language skills. And after I got done with that conversation, a gentleman from an adjacent table came over and said that he couldn't help overhear my conversation and my interests and my travels. And he said he was from the CIA. And I looked up and there it was, the banner. It said CIA, indeed. And so that was how I was approached. He gave me the spiel about the exciting career options at the CIA, and they all seemed to really suit my passions and my desire to serve. So that I think that's what really motivated me to join. It's wanting a challenging career and wanting to make a difference. And not to sound cliche, but I also wanted to give back to the country that I feel had given me so much. My family immigrated to the U.S. when I was 9. It was a difficult transition for my parents. They didn't exactly assimilate, but they did it for us kids. And we didn't have the best economic circumstances, but I acquired strong work ethics from a young age in order to rise above the circumstances. I applied myself, worked really hard, got into good schools. I was really curious about the world. So I availed myself to experiences like traveling overseas, studying and working abroad. And so when the opportunity presented itself to work for the CIA, it just felt right for me to give back to the country from which I have benefited so much.
Lillian, what was it like for a young lady joining the CIA when you entered on duty?
Yeah, I remember being all excited. I was excited about being of service, excited about embarking on an adventure of a lifetime. I remember being in the very first time I walked on that iconic CIA seal in the lobby. But then when I looked at the stars on the memorial wall, I was reminded of the duty, my actual duty. And so it hit me then that the office in which I was entering was a very serious one with high stakes. It wasn't just going to be all fun and games. And so inside the agency, I found everyone to be welcoming, and the experienced officers like your wife, Bobby, they were so willing to coach and mentor. I would wake up every morning feeling really excited to go to work, to make a difference. Overall, it just was an incredibly fulfilling, experience. But I want to note that I've never thought of myself as a female officer or an Asian officer, only as an officer. But I get that that's not how a lot of people might view me, especially in certain parts of the world. But that actually worked to my advantage because people don't expect spies to look like me, an Asian female. And so depending on where I was, I could be underestimated, overlooked, or in a lot of ways, I was able to be invisible. So I was able to fly under the radar to get my job done. So being who I am was actually very helpful.
Yeah, as you know, my wife, of course, was an earlier generation, but when she was in the field, she found that she was quite often overlooked altogether, which was a real asset for her.
Yeah, exactly.
And how well did agency training prepare you for a career in the clandestine service?
Yeah, very well, I would say. I began by working on a regional desk to learn about intelligence priorities, intelligence collection process, and operational case management. That was essentially my on-the-job training before receiving specialized operational training to prepare me for field work. The training included tradecraft and exercises in the full agent recruitment cycle, the spotting, assessing, developing, recruiting, handling, and terminating assets. But of course, as you know, there's no training in the world that can prepare you for every possible scenario that could happen in life. And when those circumstances arise, you just have to exercise common sense and good judgment. And I like to think that the CIA's recruiting efforts do a good job of hiring those with those basic skills to set them up for success.
Lillian, what can you share with our audience about your experiences in CIA's East Asia Division?
Yeah, so for context, East Asia Division is one of several geographical divisions that is a component of CIA's Directorate of Operations, which is a clandestine arm of the agency where officers often live and work undercover. I think this organizational structure might have changed a little bit over time, but I think this remains accurate. And I was one of those officers who had a cover identity, and depending on what cases I was working on, I would juggle different identities. I would run specialized ops against specific targets. In East Asia Division, I would work on joint ops with other federal agencies like ICE and the FBI. I would be deployed on short notice overseas to debrief foreign assets. So from a personal and professional standpoint, it was a very rewarding experience. I got to use my Chinese and French language skills and my cultural knowledge in handling cases. I got to meet and befriend very interesting people, both U.S. and non-U.S. citizens.
Can you generically describe the kinds of things you did in field assignments?
Yeah, so I served both in the U.S. and in the field, handling various cases. I also worked a lot at headquarters. And during the day, my work would involve a lot of paperwork and writing up intelligence reports from the previous night for dissemination to the larger intelligence community. And at night was when I would engage in the asset recruitment cycle. Sometimes it would be going to events to target someone and make a connection for a continuing developmental relationship. Sometimes it would be handling an already recruited asset by meeting and debriefing the asset and tasking the asset with new intelligence collection requirements. But as mentioned before, I would often use my language skills and cultural knowledge in those cases in the ops.
Why did you decide to leave the agency?
Yeah, it was a very difficult decision to make because I made a lot of good friends and connections in the agency, but it was ultimately for personal and family reasons. My mother developed some health issues, and the agency was actually very accommodating and did attempt to work with me and presented options for me to stay on. But ultimately, I made the decision to resign in order to be more accessible and available for my mother.
What was the transition like from government service back to civilian life? So law degree, practicing law in New York City, and now a professional screenwriter.
Yeah, to be honest, I felt lost for a bit after leaving the CIA. I really missed that sense of family and purpose that was so hard to find anywhere else. The CIA was such a huge part of my identity. So after I resigned, I had to go find myself essentially. So I turned to law because I always needed to be challenged and, I'm forever curious. And so that seemed like a good career path for me. I specialized in emerging emerging technologies and became a privacy cybersecurity lawyer on Wall Street. And so that was a very fulfilling experience. And I would say, I know you're going to ask me this later, but I just kind of weave this in now, that my experiences in the CIA actually helped me in my career as a lawyer, in that I got really good at anticipating issues and planning accordingly. I was also very good at coming up with creative and practical solutions to problems as a lawyer. And I was good at managing competing priorities. And those are all skills that I honed in the CIA. But while working as a lawyer, I also got back into my childhood passion of writing, which I had to put aside when I was working for the CIA. Not that I couldn't write when I was working in the CIA, but I just wanted to focus on the actual work and not be distracted by my creative pursuits. And I had been writing since I was a little girl, so it actually felt therapeutic to get back into it after I left the CIA, to kind of figure out who I am and what I want my identity to be, which I ultimately decided is a writer. And I didn't break into Hollywood until the pandemic happened, and Zoom helped to open up doors for me. Prior to that, I had gone through screenwriting programs at UCLA, at NYU, and I won, writing contests and some notable ones, but I still wasn't making any traction. And it's an industry with a lot of barriers to entry. With Zoom, I suddenly had greater access that I had never had before. I met my literary manager via Zoom, and he was the one who got me my first staffing job on the Netflix show Fubar, starring Arnold Schwarzenegger. And then I was off to the races. I quit my legal job to work full-time as a writer for the past 3 years. And I would say my CIA experience has helped my writing career tremendously. And not just because my first writing job was a spy show, but the skills, I think, of thinking outside of the box, imagining all the possible what-if scenarios and exploring those scenarios, working collaboratively as well as independently in service of a show. And having that cultural sensitivity as well, because you have to work with a lot of different people. They're all critical skills that I honed as a CIA officer, which now I transfer into my writing career. And I think generally speaking, all the skills I learned and honed at the CIA have become essential life skills that serve me well in my daily life, even practical skills in physical security, personal security, and cyber security. So I'm generally more alert and attuned to my surroundings now, for better or worse.
Well, you did a great job of anticipating my next question. So we'll move on. Off camera, we were talking about the dynamic tension between writing for a public audience and writing for a professional audience, former intelligence officers, and then also the Hollywood factor. What have you encountered during your current career, and how have you dealt with that?
Yeah, so as most of the general public knows, Hollywood likes to dramatize stories and the characters, how they operate. And to the professional audience, those who've served in the intelligence community, I would encourage you to suspend disbelief and go along with the ride. Because if not, I think most of the time, as you know, our jobs, a lot of it is not very glamorous, sitting at a desk or working on a computer or in meetings, talking to assets, talking to people. So not exactly the most exciting thing to see on screen. So there necessarily has to be some creative license. But what I do in the room is at least I try to get some of the basic terminologies right, like officer versus agent. Hollywood gets that wrong a lot of times. So I often try to correct that and at least reflect that accurately on screen. And then the agent recruitment cycle, for example, I try to, anything like that that's already in the public domain, I just try to bring to the forefront and try to clarify and helping the creatives in Hollywood understand what each of those terms mean and how an officer would operate in each one of those phases without giving away any trade secrets, of course. And on that note, when I do create my own screenplays, my own series, I do run that by the publication board, and the CIA's publication board is really, really good and really responsive in that regard. So they vet the materials to make sure that there are no secrets that are disclosed. But I am very diligent about doing that myself to make sure that none of that gets disclosed, while balancing the need for Hollywood to still tell good stories. Yeah.
Good for you. Lillian, as you know, we have multiple audiences for these programs. And one of those audiences are younger Americans. What advice would you have for young Americans, particularly young women, considering a career in intelligence?
Yeah, good question. So I would say, first of all, that the CIA has done a really good job of embracing diversity. And I think the percentage of men to women is now like 50-50. So the agency really values women and diversity in general. I would say know thyself. That's the most important advice. This is not a 9-to-5 kind of job. You have to be comfortable thinking and living outside of the box. You have to be comfortable with ambiguity because officers work in gray areas. You have to know how to work autonomously and also be a good team player. And you should be the creative type so you can be a good problem solver and be able to come up with ideas and think on your feet. And you should also be self-motivated and have the ability to work without recognition, because this is a kind of job where you're not going to get that public recognition for the good work that you do. So, and I also encourage you to keep your background and lifestyle clean. And what I mean by that is that the CIA does an extremely thorough background check. Mine took over a year. They research your entire life history. They examine your character, your reliability, your soundness of judgment. They look at any conflicting interests. They'll look at your social media, so be careful what you post. They'll assess your willingness and your ability to hold sensitive information private and secure. So, and they'll assess all of that by putting you through a polygraph test, and you'll go through an intensive mental and physical medical examination as well. So if you pass all this and you're offered a job, it would be the most incredible and unique experience you'll ever have in your life. And it certainly was the greatest honor for me to have served. So I highly encourage it if you have the opportunity.
Well said. As you know, I retired almost 20 years ago, but the agency's diversity hiring program had already begun even then. One of the things that we were saying to a variety of applicants even 20 plus years ago was that target assets really come in all backgrounds. And what we needed was a very diverse community of officers to find somebody who would mesh well with that target individual. And if we were going to hire the same person over and over again, we weren't going to be nearly as successful. And I think the agency program of diversity has really been a very successful one.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I think that's been my experience as well.
Yeah. Well, I want to thank Lillian Wang, and I am looking forward to the next thrilling series.
Yeah, well, thank you very much, Jim. It's been a privilege speaking with you.
AFIO is a small, nonprofit, apolitical, educational organization whose main mission is to help prepare the next generation of intelligence officers to confront the challenges our nation faces in the years ahead. To learn more or support our outreach programs, visit www.afio.org.